Hi, everybody, and welcome to the webinar today. If Stevie Wonder doesn't get your toe tapping, I'm not sure what will. Welcome. My name is Allison O'Connor. I am with the CSU Extension office in Larimer County. My co-pilot, as per usual, is Cassie Anderson with the Adams County Extension office. And we also have Chris Hilgert, our State Master Gardener Coordinator and Ornamental Horticulturalist, joining us. And we will be behind the scenes answering questions. And I will introduce our wonderful speaker in just a moment after I get through a couple housekeeping things. The first is that CSU is an equal opportunity access and non-discrimination university. The link is there if you want to learn more or have any questions. And just to let you know, we are recording this webinar. Mel informed us that she has quite a bit of content to cover. And so if you need to leave for any reason, you can always catch the recording at planttalk.org/webinars, which Cassie just put into the chat. We have all of our previous classes from this year and years past on the website, plus we have everything that is coming up. Today, if you do have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to ask those, and Cassie, Chris, and I will answer as best we can, and if not, we will toss them to Mel to answer a little bit later. This is part of a regular series that we do on the second Wednesday of the month at noon Mountain Time. Next month, Cassie will join us with weeds, what they tell you, what you need to know, and probably also address management techniques of weeds. So please register for the June 10th presentation. The link is there, the QR code is there, and we will also put that in the chat for you. And without further ado, I'm so pleased to have Melissa Schreiner joining us. She is the entomologist in the Tri-River area of Colorado, and she's with CSU Extension. She wears many hats, including doing ornamental horticulture pests, but also agricultural pests as well. And she really is one of the best bug nerds I have ever known. So Melissa, take it away. We're so glad that you could be here. And make sure you unmute first.
Thank you, Allison. I needed the assistance there. Let me get my slides going, and we will get started discussing myths and misunderstood insects together today. Thank you so much for the opportunity and your time today to learn more about this group of animals that I think receives a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of fear around arthropods. They're some of the oldest animals on the planet, and they too call it home. And so I'm grateful that you're going to all join me today to help be open-minded about, a group of animals that just because you may not love them, it doesn't mean they don't deserve to necessarily be here on the planet. And I want to really hope to crack open some of these theories and maybe do some myth busting together today. I first just want to introduce myself. Allison gave me a lovely intro, but I want to provide my contact information to folks. I love insect identification. I love communicating with people. I'm a very busy person, and I work within a 4-county area of Colorado as a primary focus. But if you ever have something you think is noteworthy or you'd like to get in touch with an extension entomologist, I'm available to you. Just know that it may not be an immediate response you receive, but I would love to be a resource to you guys. So I'm spending a lot of my time, just like in this image, I'm out on farms, I'm with arborists, hospitals call me, restaurants, commercial businesses are facing questions around insects, and I keep a pretty busy schedule. So just I appreciate your grace with me as I get back to you, but know that you will eventually receive a response. I do work out against the Western Utah border here in Western Colorado. It's something often people are they're hours and hours and hours away. I was a child of the urban corridor of the Front Range area. I grew up in Boulder County outside of in the Longmont area. And about 5 years ago, I hopped over to work as an extension entomologist for CSU, covering Mesa, Delta, Montrose, and Ouray counties, where I'm working with the Palisade peaches. I'm working with Olathe sweet corn producers. The invasive species, the Japanese beetle, has come back over the hill after we got rid of it in the early 2000s in this fruit growing region, and now it's back. So working with invasive species. But this is an area it's very near and dear to my heart, and I think more people should come out um, and just see what this area has to offer. But we are a little bit farther away from y'all, on many of you on the urban corridor. But what is entomology? Insects are something that are around us constantly, and there is a whole field, an older field of science. It's a branch of zoology, the study of animals. So specifically looking at arthropods, so whether that's crustaceans, millipedes, centipedes, arachnids like spiders and scorpions, or insects, they are a very dominant group, an ancient group of life on the planet. And so it's been a real joy to become an entomologist in the state I grew up in and learn about some of the issues around it, but also the fascinating world of insects. I do a lot of arthropod identification. People are reaching out to me, they're asking questions about what they have, and this is at more of a commercial level that I'm getting approached. So when someone's operating a business, and they're having something they haven't seen before, I serve as more of a consultant for the university. But I'm doing a lot of education. I'm with mainly adult learners or educating farmers or certain facilities I work with, but also youth. We are able to house the Western Colorado Insect Collection here in Grand Junction. I'm lead curator, and this collection was started almost 50 years ago. It's incredible. Bob Hammond here was founder of the collection, and he has now since back donated all of his mountain high elevation butterflies to us. So we have an incredible resource. It's the second largest insect collection probably in the state, and it's not a formal collection as a research grade collection is typically deemed. This is curated like a research collection. However, it's used as a teaching collection for those in Western Colorado. I'm an illustrator as well. I'm starting to learn how to use my artistic side to help convey some of the information that I have around insects. So there'll be a few of my illustrations today just to help promote learning and make something that's maybe a little overwhelming, maybe a little bit more accessible to our visual learners. But I'm often out crop scouting. So this time of year in May, more often than not, I'm spending time outside and I'm not indoors, which I was just mentioning to some of our panelists, as a lifelong learner, some of the work I do is it's a real gift. It's working in all of these different systems to not only solve problems, but to help inspire people around some of the impacts, the beneficial impacts even that insects have on our lives. But let's get down to it. I want to talk about myths and decide what's fact and what is a myth, and all these rumors, as you will, on the street. I grew up watching Mythbusters. I hope some folks in the crowd know that reference. It was a great TV show, and they were going out and trying to prove some of these, urban legends, correct or incorrect. And I hope to kind of design this talk that way a little bit today. We'll be going through a lot of different subject matter together, but I just want to let you know that I've formatted my slides in a way that it's going to be hitting on a certain myth, and it's based around quotes from real people in Colorado, things I've heard, things I see on social media, things people text me. But they're being shared for the first time. So I just ask you all to be open-minded. We're all here to learn, and we all have these, of course, understandings of what these insects must be and how harmful they may be. And I want to bust some of these myths because, of course, there are a few bad apples, but this is one of the largest. It really is the largest group of animals on the planet. Invertebrates really make up almost 90% or something more of described life to science. So all the elephants and the cheetahs that you see are such a small fraction. Our mammalian species, our reptilian species, amphibians. I mean, so many of these described organisms are, of course, microbes, but pretty much everything else in that slice of the pie are invertebrates. So, and they've also been dwelling on the planet for some time. So I want to start with ants. The quote I'm using here is ants are just picnic pests. And to be honest, I think that limits them so much. They're a very ancient eusocial group of animals, meaning that all reproductive rights go to one individual within a colony. The the royalty, the queen, if you will, and king at times with termites, for example. And we're talking about ants here. But ant colonies are some of the most complicated superorganisms on the planet. I mean, we can compare them to the human species. I mean, ants go to war, they have nurses, they um, they do quite a bit we'll get into. And I mean, next to humans, they're really maybe the most complex animal on the planet. Um, they are, I mean, they embody teamwork. They're doing quite a few really interesting things in the environment. I want to use a few examples. Leafcutter ants, they have adapted incredible mandibles to chew chunks of plants, and they will bring those back to their hive, if you will, or their nest, and they make these massive hauls of vegetation, and they're moving that vegetation around down underground, and they chew it up, and every species of leafcutter ant may harvest different plants, and they're taking those plants down into their nest to use them to grow a fungus that they then eat. And so, in order to adapt to living in the desert, ants have been able to take xeric plants underground down to the water table and use a certain level of moisture to cultivate fungus. So they are farmers. They are taking care of livestock on plants. This is a photo from Africa. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention where it was from. I think it may be a National Geographic article. It shows you an excavated leafcutter nest. So they can be quite extensive. This is one of the larger nests that would occur on the planet. But this is a photo of those leafcutter ants that are it's probably Thanksgiving Day for them. They're covered in fungal spores. They have plenty to eat, and they're in the middle of nowhere where there's no food for them otherwise. So they're quite innovative as well, and somewhat complex scientists themselves. But as I mentioned, ants have been ranching livestock for millions of years longer than human beings. And it's because they realize the benefit of guarding certain hemipterous insects or true bugs that are often sedentary in this stage, as you see all of these spiky, hairy looking nymphs that in, center right of our stage here, we have an ant that's protecting these hemipterous insects. They're tree hoppers in the family Membracidae, and they're young. They're not yet flying around as adults. And so ants actually, they take care of them. They'll move them around to different plants. They'll defend them from parasites. And ants do this because ants can't drink the fluids of that plant and digest it. So they don't have a complex microbiome. And so bear with me here, but ants are keeping these livestock for a very particular reason, and it's for the production of honeydew. So these insects here, whether you can see it or not, their mouth parts, those tree hoppers, are are stabbing their mouths into the plant to drink the fluids, and they digest that plant material and they poop out a droplet of honeydew. They excrete it, and it's a liquid, clear sugar. I mean, it's essentially sugar. To us, it might feel very disgusting to eat the poop of another animal. However, for an ant, they have been very innovative and they have been able to find a way to digest that plant material once before they consume it. It becomes consumable for them at that point. So it's a value for them to be keeping a sanctuary of certain hemipterous insects. And you see here, this is in Gamble Oak. I took this image in 2019 and I've always really loved it. And it's because that ant is really just in this defensive posture. I got very close with my camera in this image, and she was willing to protect her livestock against, this big camera lens. And so they were very aware and were probably grateful when I moved on. But another group of ants that we have very commonly here across the Colorado landscape, they form these pebble mounds, but they're xerophilus desert seed harvester ants. And there's several genuses, or genera, I should say, that are true seed specialists. So their role in the desert is to find seeds in the landscape and store them in pantries underground. And they're harvesting all of these seeds so they can survive winter. And you can see them gathering those here. And my partner, Tristan Kubik, with the Natural Heritage Program, he's He's a famous ant guy in my world anyway. And he always says deserts run on ants. And I can just hear him saying it now. But of course, during monsoonal activity within these desert systems, flooding occurs and these nests become destroyed. And what happens is it's unfortunate for that civilization of ants. We're just learning about how cool they are. However, this big seed pantry gets distributed across the landscape and it contributes to native plant distribution. So it helps to seed the future of our desert systems. These are gardeners of the desert, if you will, and they help to reseed it. Um, Moving on to another myth. I'm sure all of you are just squirming in your seats. Cockroaches are not a very well-loved group of animals. I hear from comments from the public, they serve no purpose. They are dirty. They are public health problems. And that is, of course, true. There are aspects of cockroaches and there are pest species of cockroaches. So ones that we as human beings find to be troublesome or damage our ability to mainly sell food. It's a big deal within the food safety realm, cockroaches, because they can vector things like salmonella. But there's really only a few urban dwelling cockroaches that are causing problems. So there are a few bad apples here. So we have a mugshot of a cockroach there for you. And cockroaches are absolutely public health concerns, but it's only a few species. So when we say the word cockroach, that means over 4,000 species. So it's not just one out there that's doing the doing, that's moving bacteria and fungi and parasites around, salmonella. You can see here in this petri dish, those are gel plates that have been dyed, and then you can see the fungus that's tan that's growing in there. It's likely actually, I think this is actually E. coli. So this is a bacterial plate, and it is showing that as cockroaches have walked across that media, they have transferred that bacteria. And so these are a few species of our cockroaches you would find in the city of New York or in some of our larger cities. So, Oriental cockroaches, German cockroaches. There are several. However, it's really important to realize, I mean, this group of thousands of organisms must be doing something than just vectoring problems for people, right? I mean, they've been around quite a long time, and cockroaches absolutely are part of the group of unsung heroes in entomology. Many of them are actually supporting nutrient cycling and food webs and biodiversity. So they're helping to break down the litter of tree litter, for example, like leaves that fall from deciduous trees. And that material needs to be converted to usable nutrients by plants. And there are a whole array of microbes and animals that help to contribute to that decomposition so that we can have long-standing healthy forests. There are many cockroaches that are important food sources for other wildlife. Many of the things that you may find that you hate deeply actually are really important food sources for other groups of animals you may love very well. Birds, reptiles, amphibians, other insects, rodents, they rely often on cockroaches as part of their food web. So food webs are really, I have a simple one I've stamped in from Google search here, and it does show you that, how different organisms are interacting lead to the ability for other organisms maybe higher in the food chain to have something to eat. So we all have a place on the planet. I do really want to argue that this is a great food source for many groups of animals. You may not love wasps. I hope to convince you of that today. This is one of our cockroach specialists. So if you don't like cockroaches, you may choose to adore or at least appreciate some of their predators. But really, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I'm sorry for my pixelated image here. At least some of them came out all right. But these are tropical cockroaches. And man, in the tropics, things just get more colorful and larger and maybe arguably more fascinating. There's more oxygen in like near the equator where we have a lot of our rainforests, and it allows for those organisms to get larger to account for more of that oxygen. They create more carbon as a biomass, and it helps to account for that. So we do have some large, really beautifully ornate tropical cockroaches, some famous from Australia and only occur one place on the planet, others throughout Eurasia. And so, just so you know, there are thousands likely that you may find beneficial. So there's just a few bad apples, and I want to convince you that um, even the ones that are troublesome, I just hope that you realize that this group of animals is just so much larger than it's not just one cockroach out there, and that it's bad. It's that there's a whole array of organisms here that have very likely an important purpose to play in our ecosystems. It's important to note that very recently, cockroaches on the left, mantids in the center, and our termites on the right. And I'm sorry I didn't order my orders up top in that order, but all of those groups, the mantids, Mantodia, the cockroaches, Blatodia, and termites, Isoptera, are all now united based on genomics work. So people have looked at the genetics and they all, there's an array of organisms, but they are now put into one group together. So they have been lumped when historically they were split. So just keep in mind that the ability for them to move their heads independently is what has united them. And if I can't convince you to love cockroaches, even though the tropical ones I find incredibly beautiful and significant to our ecosystems, maybe I can convince you that a relative of theirs, some of these beautiful orchid mantids, which is absolutely a relative of cockroaches, and all mantids in general are pretty phenomenal. They're amazing predators. They're fascinating. They have some of the best eyesight in the animal kingdom. Um, just just know that there's more than meets the eye to this whole group of dictyopterans. All right, we're going to move on to another really big myth that I frankly struggle with this one quite a bit. I'll be honest with, with everyone here. Um, I hear a lot about wasps. There is a lot of fear about this group of organisms. And when we have, of course, allergens, and when we have certain problematic wasps, like aggressive yellow jackets, those individuals can speak for a larger group, unfortunately. It's the similar situation where we're defining wasps as bad, but maybe there's only a few of them that really are causing humans issues. I hear that wasps are evil, they're aggressive. There's a real cancel culture around wasps that they are guaranteed to sting, that they're out to get you. I asked my brother for some quotes because I know uh, he struggles with wasps and with spiders, by the way, which we'll get to. And he says they smell your fear. That's my brother's quote right there. And I included it because that's how people feel. It's a genuine feeling. I'm not trying to say what you feel is incorrect. It's just that I hope to provide you an education and understanding that there is so much fear around certain groups of animals. Hollywood makes animals and insects specifically scary. Hollywood fear mongering is actually a defined term, and it refers to the entertainment industry's tendency to exaggerate, be sensational about things and fabricate dangers so that film content is going to sell. So this unfortunately has done a real disservice to many groups of animals. It was fun to make this slide and pick the different images. Like predator, I think, is the group many of you may know. There are certain insects that people are thinking look like the predator alien or whatever it's called. But there's definitely fear-based storytelling that's a part of our culture. And I think fear and misunderstanding alongside living with wildlife is something I really want to touch on. Instead of us asking ourselves, why is this animal dangerous? Of course, that's where our lizard brains go. We want to, of course, always be protecting ourselves. But we can instead ask new questions that help open our minds up to new ideas of possibility. And, what role does this animal play in the world? Violence towards snakes and sharks and this delete, I don't do insects, no matter what you tell me, Mel. That may truly be a fear in your heart. That is something that I can't convince you out of. But violence against animals is wrong. I see YouTube videos of some of these animals getting destroyed, and there's like this culture of acceptance around it. And I really want to take a moment to tell you how much that really impacts someone like me that has studied these animals and have really gained a serious perspective on their value to our ecosystems, but also to humanity. And I just want to remind you all, you can feel however you want about insects. That is completely up to you. But an animal does not have to be lovable to deserve to exist. So when something has existed for millions of years, I think it's unfortunate that so many of them have been made villains. I think they have quite in-depth stories to really get to know better. But it's true that wasps are villainized and feared. The Hunger Games scene is where my brain immediately went here. Um, those tracker, jacker, wasp, whatever they have come up with in that movie was it was well executed. Hollywood does a good job at making some of these things and blowing up the fear around them. So, unfortunately, this is now it's getting to the point where when we even have new species come, for example, to the United States that would never successfully live here, they're, there's a lot of fear around when something new shows up or when we see memes like the scariest insects in the world and we see these. I don't even know if that's a real image, to be honest with you, but the murder hornet story that occurred in the US several years ago and the rush to stop them from invading. And when really this insect was not going to be successfully ubiquitously across the environment, it came from a very specific sea level, high humidity kind of area. It's not going to, for Colorado, it's not really going to check that box. But there were many wasps that we have common in Colorado at the time, and even till still today. Unfortunately, this has had a long-lasting effect. Some of our Colorado native wasps, these horntails that can't even sting, and then these cicada killers. So yeah, they're taking out cicadas, but unless you're a cicada, you don't have much to worry about, truly. They've been turned in as this is a murder hornet, Mel. What do we do? I killed it right away. And I have to take a moment and just, I hope that some of this education can help enlighten you all that we have some large wasps in Colorado. They're not out to get humans necessarily. And just because they're big and a wasp does not make them a murder hornet. And just so you know, this insect, the Asian giant hornet, has now been taken out of the United States. It's not an issue here. So if you're finding a large wasp, you should ask yourself instead, is this a murder hornet? Don't ask yourself that, but ask who, in terms of what wasps in the environment could it be that's maybe common to your state, like Colorado. Wasps in general can be nectar seeking just like bees, just like butterflies, just like beetles and ants and other insects that need floral resources. That pollen is protein, and that nectar that the flower offers is carbohydrates. So it's needed resources that these animals need, and plants can't move around their own genetics. And so for successful pollination to occur, these plants offer treats to animals, and it entices them to make a visit. And then they stop in and they end up with pollen all over them, the male gametes. And then that insect, unbeknownst to it goes on, goes off and gets more treats. And it's unknowingly moving around that plant's genetic information so that it can successfully reproduce and set seed and live year after year. So, many insect adults are relying, not just wasps, but wasps are a big group that rely on flowers. They've co-evolved with them. They're a pollinator. So I can't agree. I think it's absolutely false that wasps are evil. They're contributing to so many of the angiosperms, the flowering seed-bearing plants that we have on the planet. And many arthropods can sting. And I think there's a lot of misinformation around stinging insects, but it's, of course, when people have allergens, it can be very dangerous to be stung by certain insects. Besides that, if you know you're not allergic and you've been stung before, it can be quite a painful experience. Having any animal within your personal space when you don't expect it to be there. I've studied insect fear for some time now, and that is one of the largest drivers of it is when someone feels something is within their personal space, whether that's a human or a stinging arthropod or poison ivy. You don't want, certain things in your personal space. I get it. It's really important to realize that not all insects are out to sting us. It's often situational. There's only a few occasions that we really see aggressive behavior. And I think it's worth talking about, hymenopterans, so ants, bees, and wasps do have the ability to sting. They have an ovipositor that they lay eggs with that has been modified to have venom sacs. And if they decide to lay an egg, they can. If they decide to sting and envenomate prey, they may need to use that venom to help externally digest a food source, for example. Many wasps take out cicadas, for example, by envenomating them and paralyzing that cicada so that they can take that cicada while it's still alive, but paralyzed, down to an earthen chamber, and that wasp will lay an egg. Um, it will be an it's basically on the outside very often of that cicada. So it's almost like a parasite to the cicada. It uses that cicada's life force to become an adult wasp. So venom is not used primarily in the animal kingdom. So this goes for snakes, this goes for spiders, this goes for wasps. Venom is not used primarily for defense. That's a secondary use. I'm not saying that you haven't been stung out of the blue for no reason necessarily. Of course, sometimes things happen with insects and they act unusually. But most of the time, venom is a guarded resource to the point where they're trying to use just the appropriate amount for their prey items. So unfortunately, when they feel in danger, and we may have a bare foot going over grass and there's a wasp involved in that sandwich, we end up with individuals that are stung. But wasp is given to many types of insects. So we have social wasps, we have hunting wasps, we have parasitoid wasps, wood wasps, and gall wasps. And I'll just show you a few of those. This is one of our ground nesting wasps that lives as an individual. It's not a part of a colony. So it's a solitary wasp, unlike our yellow jackets that are similar to bees in the way that they have a big superorganism and they have a queen wasp, and she's in charge of reproducing for the whole colony and creating a caste system. So individuals that will raise her young and care for them so that she can have a colony of workers, etc. So this is a sand wasp that is taking out a horsefly. So I've been nailed by horseflies, and I can tell you they're not my favorite group out there. And it hurts. And it's wonderful that there's things in the environment that are helping to suppress those bites from happening to people. So we can thank wasps for that. We have cricket wasp. The steel blue cricket hunter is a famous insect out in my area. This is taken by the retired extension entomologist, Bob Hammond. I think it's one of my favorite insects. You only need to fear this wasp if you're a cricket. It's the only thing that it's after, and they are sleek. They truly have just the most incredible blue hue and a metallic texture to them. And they're quite busy. You'll see them often flying along cracks in the sidewalk, but they're just looking for a way to raise their young. They need a cricket to do that. We have mud daubers. So things of this nature, wasps are making nests that are made of mud, and they're storing spiders in them. So if I can't convince you in my upcoming spider section that spiders are valuable, you can at least know there is something out there that eats them. And many of our mud daubers are great spider hunters. And I think it's really neat that they make their nests out of mud instead of paper, like so many wasps are typically doing. We have spider wasps, a whole family, Pompilidae. I've highlighted here, Pepsis is the genus of this beautiful, very large wasp we have in Colorado. She's got orange wings and a velvety blue texture on her integument across her whole body. And she hunts tarantulas because she needs a tarantula to lay an egg on in order for her to have her young be fed. Her young is what eats that tarantula. So mommy wasp is going around to flowers pollinating plants, but she's also essentially getting enough energy so that she can go out and take tarantulas and wolf spiders out. I mean, that's no small feat. We have velvet ants. And you say, Mel, we're talking about wasps. Well, this is a true wasp. It's not an ant. And the females are wingless and the males have wings. And it threw taxonomists through quite a confusing rigmarole because they had to figure out what was going on with this Hymenoptera. They knew it was in the order Hymenoptera, but I think it took them a while to figure out that this was a wasp in the family Mutility and that the males were winged. These will be very quick moving wasps. Often I see them on the ground and they have very different aposematic colored patterns to them that I think make them really intriguing to learn more about. There's a great new book out for Northern America on these, if you care to know. But anyways, we do have wasps that don't sting as well. Some of our horntails I've brought up before as people have mistaken some of these individuals, not this particular species I'm showing you, but of this group, they've mistaken them for murder hornets because they're large wasps. And that alone is enough to, it's a 911 bug at that point. That's what Whitney Cranshaw always says. I love that language because there are a lot of bugs that people feel they need, it's an emergency around, when so often I wish folks would leave with being a little more intrigued. You're often left with fear. So just know not all wasps sting. There's entire groups of hundreds of organisms, if not thousands, that don't sting that we call wasps. They're just interacting with wood, for example. Um, so it's good to keep in mind they're not all out. They don't all have that infrastructure to sting. They don't all have venom. We have two giant wasps here. This is a horntail, the pigeon tremex, and that wasp lays her eggs in wood. And then this other giant wasp that we have in Colorado will sense that the wood wasp has laid her eggs, and she is a parasitoid, and she will then lay her eggs into the babies of pigeon tremex. So these are two very large wasps that I get questions about, and one is hunting the other, essentially. Here's an image from Whitney Cranshaw. It's the pigeon tremex. That long, you say, Mel, this wasp doesn't sting. Well, and it doesn't. It's only using this infrastructure to deposit eggs, as I mentioned. They're using that anatomy, that ovipositor, to lay eggs. And she's having to drill. She has a zinc-plated saw at the end of that drill. It's drilling into the wood slowly, 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 so she can get her eggs deep enough. We also have gall wasps, and I just wanted to bring these up because I think they're very common in the environment and people often have not a clue what's going on. But there are many insects that create galls, but we have a whole family of wasps, the family Cynipidae, that will chew on plants, and the response of that plant being chewed on, the insect saliva, and then the plant chemistry to defend itself from the chewing can create mutations that we call galls. And insects are able to chew on plants and mutate the plant to create a home for themselves. So just keep in mind there's many very diverse gall wasp galls that you can be intrigued to find. There was a class that I'm planning to hopefully teach where we're going to take cynipid galls and we're going to make ink because that's historically how these were used. And then, of course, we have social wasps. I have to talk about some of the problem wasps to you, or I would be held accountable, I think. So there are some that are of course, problematic, dwell around human inhabitants in urban areas, for example, or are ground nesting, and they end up in places underneath porches or sheds, and they're interacting with humans more commonly. So living with that type of wildlife can be really challenging, and there is a whole pest control industry around taking care of some of the social problematic wasps, but I just want to point out a few of them to you. I mean, here in the bottom left, we have the Western yellow jacket. In the center, we have the European paper wasp. And both of these, for their own reasons, I think it's fair to call them trouble. However, I do want to advocate, they're not just there to be aggressive and come into your backyard and cause you trouble. I mean, that's a part of this story. But yellow jackets can be a serious nuisance, of course. They're the top stingers. 90% of stings come from this insect. So if you are stung by an ant, a bee, or a wasp, which represents hundreds of thousands of individuals, it's important to realize that 90% of the time, statistically, you are being stung by a yellow jacket. They are aggressive wasps. They are social wasps. They have an individual waiting at the top of the nest to look to see if anyone's coming. And if someone comes within a certain radius, boom, they're going to sting because they're protecting this brood, their royalty, their highness, their queen. There's a lot more to protect as a social organism, which is why they're a little bit more on the defense and can unfortunately cause humans to be stung even commonly. This is a funny image. I actually think this was a honeybee with Emma Stone, but I just had to throw it in there because this is not an uncommon face I see people make with Western yellow jackets specifically. So This is something what Western yellow jackets do. This was just an image too good not to use, but they're famous scavengers. These maybe are something you could maybe think of as a picnic pest, because meat and carrion and dead material is something they're attracted to. They smell that, and as a decomposer, they are going out into the environment and helping to break down that material. In this image, I meant to mention this was a fish on the side of some alpine lake, and it wasn't going to go anywhere unless flies and wasps did the dirty work, that those dirty jobs, right? But they eat that material, they change it into something usable for our environment. You and I are able to live on this planet because organisms like fungi and microbes and wasps and ants and termites and flies are all actively breaking down material like feces and dead bodies that wouldn't go anywhere otherwise. I mean, sorry to get all emotional about it almost, because it's like they're not thanked for this. We just didn't hate them, and it's really important to know they do have jobs despite even their troublesome behavior. Um, Here's my last big one. Spiders are scary. Spiders are common biters. You swallow several spiders in your lifetime. I hope some of you have heard some of these things. These are things I, even as an entomologist, hear, and of course, many of them are not true. To you, spiders may be scary. They're very foreign. They could look very alien-like to you. It's an organism that's been around for millions of years, so they've had some time to get weird, folks. They really have evolved very interesting strategies for survival. And humans perceive that as something that we're often very disturbed by, unfortunately. But there's a lot of myths and there's a lot of violence around just like delete it, cancel culture, like I'm out of here, like I ain't doing it kind of attitude that I think by hopefully talking to you some about it, that perspective is yours to decide how you approach this. But it is false that spiders are common biters. It's false that you swallow probably some of them in your lifetime. I mean, I've heard this every year you swallow spiders. This is not a common thing, folks. I'm not saying it doesn't happen at all, but this is not commonly happening to people. Spiders and arachnophobia, it's worth touching on. It's a common thing. This group of eight-legged animals gets a lot of fear, and it's become normalized. Spiders are often feared, hated, and killed on sight. Movies and myths and media are exaggerating that danger. I mean, your home is part of the greater Colorado ecosystem. And just the other day, I had mosquitoes in my house I saw getting eaten by, I wish I could remember this type of hunting spider that I found. I've just recently learned it, so it's escaping me now. But spiders are all around you and they're helping to balance things like pests in your environment. They're not just out to sit and wait in the corner to get you. It's quite exaggerated, I think, some of people's reactions here, not to personally offend anyone. Arachnophobia is a very real phobia. However, I think we've leaned a little heavier into that. It's become a lot more common for people. So I just think the normalization of that is dangerous. And I just want to point out that spiders do help ecosystems function, helps your backyard, helps your garden out, helps you from being fed on by a bloodthirsty mosquito. But honestly, like the animals that we fear the most are some of those doing the invisible work. So spiders are incredible hunters, and they do have the ability to ambush and actively hunt their prey. So some do see quite well, and some of them wait in ambush. This crab spider in the bottom left, you can see it has two pairs of legs that are quite long, and they're exaggerated so that they can grasp for prey. They blend into white flowers. You can see in the center image, you may see a bee on a flower, but if you look below the petals, you may find someone lurking there, waiting for lunch. So spiders are often quite the masters of disguise. And then we have many spiders that actively hunt prey. And you can see that spider in the bottom right it's a jumping spider, has pretty large eyes, and they see very well. So they need to be able to see and move around to hunt for something in the environment. But spiders and harvestmen are common predators. In general, spiders are using webs. So there's many groups that make different types of webs, different families of spiders. And the spiders that use webs to interact with their prey items often don't see very well. It depends. Many of our orb weavers can actually, like the one pictured here in the bottom left, can only detect the presence and absence of light. So if it makes you feel any more safe when you see a big orb or you've walked right through one, God forbid I do that in the cornfield sometimes. And even as an entomologist, it can be startling. So it's okay that you become startled by these things, but think to eternally hate them with the fire of a thousand suns as our humanity has started to lean into. I think that doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, half of these spiders can't even see you when you're peacefully observing them. They're not sitting there out to get you. They can't even navigate to you. They never leave their web. They're using that web to catch and snare prey, and they're envenomating that prey so that they can digest it externally. Venom exists in spiders' mouth parts. So it's quite different than how ants, bees, and wasps administer venom, but they're not trying to seek you and harm you. They have a prey item that they're out looking for or they're waiting to catch. Just for some perspective, um, they're catching their prey with their webs. These garden orb weavers are quite common and they're beautiful. I think it's pretty wonderful how these have been studied recently. It's fascinating. Some of their they're able to release pheromones that mimic moth pheromones, like some of our like Nuttall's sheep moth, and it attracts moths to the web, and the moths get stuck in the web, and then the spiders can eat. And it's amazing that they've like learned like some of this like chemical persuasion using certain sex pheromones. They're quite fascinating. You may be wondering why there's these lines of very dense webbing in these images. Both of them have it. These are different spiders, different times, different gardens. And it's often to help to, my understanding is it has to do with a bird looking down at them, and it helps to disrupt that web. It creates a visual disruption so birds can't see them and then they don't get eaten by birds as easily. But many spiders are eating the wasp we've discussed, the grasshoppers, this beautiful yellow spider in the right is eating a young grasshopper. I mean, I know how people have a reason to be upset about the population and the abundance of grasshoppers in the state of Colorado. So just keep in mind that spiders are helping to balance that ecosystem. They have been on the planet doing this for a long time. Um, this is, I think it's Johnson's jumping spider eating a moth on cacti. This was down actually in Mexico. It's the emerald jumping spider. It's one of the most beautiful jumping spiders I've ever been able to see, and it was hunting tree crickets at a park when I was down there. Um, but I have a shirt on that even says it. Let spiders live. I wore it today for you all. They're important. They are major controllers of problem insects like mosquitoes. You can always move them outside. I'm not saying to adopt them and start keeping them as pets, folks. But it's amazing to just to be reminded that your home may feel separate than the ecosystem, but frankly, it's not. And you do have pests living in your home that are naturally controlled by spiders. They're helping you out. So just take a gentler hand towards them. Less than 1% of them are medically relevant. So they're not sending people commonly to the hospital. There's a lot of insect stings and bites that get misdiagnosed as spiders, even by our medical doctors. I have a real issue and a real bone to pick with some of the medical community that thinks that they know plants and insects. I was just told by a medical doctor here 2 weeks ago, poison ivy doesn't exist in Colorado. So just so you know, they don't know it all. They know a lot. They know their areas that they've studied well, but they can't be expected to be an expert in everything. So there's going to be some levels of error there. Not every bite that you encounter is from a spider. It's more often a mosquito. Just keep that in mind. It's natural to have fear, and understanding reduces fear. I hope some of this talk has helped with that today. I have just a few more, and then I'll be concluding my talk here. But harvestmen are also arachnids. So before we leave the realm of arachnids, I think it's important that we talk about how harvestmen are blamed as the most venomous arachnids on Earth. These are memes I pulled from the internet, y'all. This is one of my drawings on the left, but the others are just things I found on the internet. This is like word of mouth on the street. Hopefully some of you this is resonating with because it's very true. This is a common thing I hear, but it's not correct. It is a false myth. We can debunk this as fact. This is not a real thing. Harvestmen It's very common that this is a perception people have of them, and it's always really boggled my mind. This is false. Daddy longlegs are not highly venomous. They're called a lot of different things, and I think a common name given to many groups of animals has maybe caused some trouble here. There are some other cellar spiders that can be venomous to people, and I'm wondering if because a common name has been switched around now, what we typically call harvestmen or animals that belong to Opiliones order of arachnids, they aren't venomous. They can't bite people. Um, they matter in our ecosystems for a lot of reasons. They're important scavengers. They're helping to recycle nutrients and eat pests. There is not an agricultural system that I enter in the state that does not have harvestmen as a predator that is benefiting farmers and gardeners. They consume small insects and mites and tiny, tiny arthropods, and they help to balance the food web of their ecosystem. But these are harmless arachnids. I don't know where people got this myth. If anyone has any idea, I have scoured the literature. I cannot figure out where this originated. I tried to. But they have extremely long legs. They have a slightly different body form. They're not true spiders. They are not producing venom. They are not spinning silk or webs. They're completely harmless to humans. So just keep in mind that things that you hear that are commonly stated and are blown up as memes and things that you hear online, it's pseudoscience. It's not real. It's just word on the street. So just coming from an expert, you can know that, one of the most common arachnid myths is built on mistaken identity, very likely. Flies, of course, we've got to bring them into the pie. They're pointless. People say they're useless. They're stupid, annoying, dirty. Mosquitoes are evil. It really depends. Absolutely, some of those things are maybe dependently true. I'm not going to sit and say they're not annoying. Flies can definitely be bothersome. They live in feces. They live in dead bodies. They are decomposers. Many of them are actually bloodthirsty animals that need a certain host's blood type to reproduce successfully. So a lot of people feel like flies don't have any purpose, and I want to really remind you that that's not the case. Flies can be predators and pollinators. They're a huge group of animal life, so they fill a lot of niches within our ecosystem. So they pretty much do it all. They're out there eating it all, so they don't get thanked for that. Many of them are, of course, sustaining themselves on nectar, like many other adult insects, and they can be even mistaken for bees or trying to blend in as such. They don't sting, but if they look like something that stings, they may not be eaten, but they're pollinators. There are predators that are hunting other nuisance insects out there. Yeah, that can really help balancing our ecosystems. There are many fly adults that are sustaining themselves on nectar, and then they have the energy to go around and in the bottom left corner, they're able to hunt caterpillars and lay their eggs inside of those caterpillars because they've fed on plants. So in that case, that was a cabbage looper that was eating cabbage, and that was a beneficial thing to happen through the human lens. But one myth that is not a myth, maybe I shouldn't start that way, but one statement I hear, and I wanted to throw something in here that's true. Insects are older than dinosaurs. A 10-year-old Girl Scout just recently said this to me, and I was so happy that she knew that because our earliest dinosaur fossils, for example, are like 275 million years old. So that's, those are definitely older than some of our insects, but we have like our earliest insect fossils arriving like 500 million years ago. Millions of years before dinosaurs walked the earth, dragonflies were taking flight. Wasps were learning to eat pollen and nectar, and they were co-evolving with land plants. Hymenopterans like ants, bees, and wasps 120 million years ago, they diversified and so did the plants on this planet because they co-evolved together. These relationships that these animals had with plants speciated our entire planet of seed-bearing plants. Our planet's oldest insects are twice as old as dinosaurs, so give them some credit. It's all I ask. Things have evolved the way that they have, and I think they deserve understanding. You know, the arthropods, like I've mentioned a few times today, it's all these arachnids, the chelicerata, the myriapods, millipedes, and centipedes, of course, insects, and then the extinct trilobites, which were aquatic organisms that no longer dwell on our planet. But they all have a shared ancestor that unites them. So this is like a mother term for the creepy crawlies, if you will. Um, but these arthropods really were some of the first animals to swim in our oceans and walk on land on the planet. And they evolved back and forth between living on land and in the water and doing it back and forth. And it's been incredible to get to learn about them. And I hope that you find inspiration to look more into the fossil record. Like this millipede replica that was built, this was back when there was a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere. But these scientists pictured next to their replica in the upper left corner are from New Mexico, so very close. And they found footprints of this millipede in fossil form. And they were wondering what animal created this. So it's amazing what you can discover looking back in time. But insects once evolved to be massive, and to avoid that oxygen overdose that the atmosphere had, they had to be really big organisms. They had to create a lot of biomass. So we had dragonflies at one point, 100 and some years, million years ago, that were as big as birds of prey. We had millipedes the size of Honda Civics. So keep in mind that where we have the most oxygen on the planet remaining today, we will have some of our largest animals. Um, I do want to realize there's a few in here I forgot about, but um, I've heard on the street that there are only a few bees. Like maybe people are commonly knowing that there's honeybees that we manage as livestock and they help with pollination in our crop plants. And they may know about bumblebees, but it's really incredible. I mean, bumblebees are, of course, from native of Northern America. They're a very interesting group to know about. Um, and of course, honeybees. They're important, and we've got a few great resources at CSU for beekeepers. But what you may have not known is worldwide, bees are a big group of animals. There are many types of bees. There's 20,000 described to scientific literature in the world. And there's about 5,000 of those. So a fourth of the world diversity occurs here in Northern America. And we in Colorado call over 1,000 of those animals natives. They've always been here in our Colorado ecosystems. So whether they live in a social setting or they're individual animals out there foraging for resources, they are bees. And there's many types of bees. So I think it is a myth to just think there's only a few of them. So get it straight in your head that we've got a lot of really interesting bees that are, like I've mentioned, they've adapted to land plants and they have helped to move those gametes around through pollination, and plants are able to live year after year because of their efforts. Here's just some illustrations showing you, yeah, bees make different decisions about the plants that they may pollinate. Um, there's certain nutritional value that comes from different plants, and those that are considered generalists and feed on many types of flowers are really beneficial for our environment. And then what's maybe more uncommon is that we have certain plants and certain insects that are specialists, and they rely on really just one interaction to allow for pollination to occur. So there are some that just specialize on like one group of plants, for example. We have a wonderful publication, The Bees of Colorado. This is out of CU Boulder. They run a really amazing bee lab there, Virginia Scott. It's still there today. And this is a wonderful document to show you as of their update. It's starting to get a little outdated. I bet you they're coming up with a new version here any day. Great resource for you guys. There are many bees in Colorado that are common. Just due to time, I won't list through these, but feel free in the recording to pause and learn more. But these specialist relationships in bees are fascinating. We have cactus bees, we have bees that just are on sunflowers or just in squash plants. So it's not just bumblebees and honeybees, and I just think it's worthwhile just sharing the importance of pollinators with you. It's not just about crop plants. It's about, all the plants that are on our mountainsides that get pollinated and live year after year because of animals like insects, like bees. They're making that happen. And in turn, we don't have soil erosion coming off of our mountains. These ecosystems are able to sustain themselves over the eras. And of course, in crop production, it's really important that we have flowers getting turned into fruit so that fruit, that pericarp, can be consumed. But of course, ultimately, the goal of that plant in creating these treats that we too benefit from, we in turn are spreading those seeds around so that plant can inhabit new areas. But yes, there's many pollinators. I think it's worth just throwing that in there. It's not just bees. Bees get a lot of attention, but beetles and flies and birds and bats don't get enough credit. So, of course, there's native bees that we have. Many of them live in the ground. So just keep in mind that they're not all coming from colonies and they're not all social. We have many bees that mama and papa are operating alone, separate of a big society. And like I mentioned, so many of them live in the ground. So having available habitat, having a cactus garden, that there's going to be areas around those plants for on-site habitat is really important. But this is false. This is my one of my last ones before I'm going to do a little bit of a conclusion. And insects are all pests. We don't need insects. I've heard this a few times. Bugs are bad. We don't need them. I'm not doing it kind of attitude. And I think it's important to realize that this is very false. We have many insects that we can call friends and we can learn their stories and become interested by them. There's a lot of drivers of pseudoscience, fear of venom, fear of disease, infestation. These are very real fears. Insects do cause problems. I'm just here today to talk to you about, the other side of things. Misidentification can be a huge issue. People think they have something they do not have, or the thing they have they think is dangerous when it is not dangerous. The social media misinformation, that's a real issue. So always feel free to reach out if you feel you need to find some facts. I'm happy to help give you my perspective. But insect fear is part of a big disconnection from living systems. It's not something that we often are born with, it's something that we're taught, but it's important to know insects worldwide are in decline. We're probably going through what I would call a sixth mass extinction of animals on the planet Earth. And it's really, unfortunately, it's pretty depressing, but I won't linger on this. But these insects are facing a lot of challenges, unfortunately, in our changing world. I mean, it is really death by a thousand cuts. There's a lot of reasons why they face decline. But I think it's more important than ever for folks, if you spent the time listening to me today, this conclusion, I think, is, I hope, a real highlight of this talk. But nature disconnection is a real issue. We're really lucky here in Colorado, I think, to have access to our public lands, and we have a lot of education and opportunities to engage with the outdoors. But people learn to fear what they don't understand. And insects and farms and wilderness, without positive exposure, people face a challenge learning how to connect to these things. And you don't learn to care and protect these things if you've never learned to love them. So it's really lovely in my job. I get to learn about Colorado insects, and I hope today to share with you just a little bit about some of the work we're doing in that space to end our talk here. We're taking college students and interns out into the field to engage them with different production systems, different natural resources, and we're teaching them to engage and document insects in ethical ways. But there's ways that you guys can become more connected to nature, and I think I really want to highlight the iNaturalist app. It's revolutionizing natural history, really, and historians are becoming connected through an app. And so you see here, this is some of their advertising material, but it helps people get outside and learning more about the species around you. So it's kind of like social media, but for wildlife. So I'm going to try to explain iNaturalist to you just a bit. But you can help us to document Colorado wildlife. There is a 5-year survey going on right now I'll get into here, but I want to highlight the iNaturalist app. You can do this on a computer or on a phone. I prefer it on the computer. I use this app a lot, but I take photos in the field with my phone and then I can upload to the app on my phone if I desire, or I'm able to essentially go online. But what it does is you go out and you take a photo of an organism. So it could be a lizard, it could be a mushroom, it could be a ladybug, it could be a bird, it could be a plant, and you're going to upload that to a software that connects you to people worldwide about different wildlife and different plants, different living systems. And then we can learn about what we have. And based on where it was found, this data is now being used to further our knowledge of where things exist and who exists where. There's been they're coming up on, pretty significant data that they're entering for planet Earth in terms of some of this biological life. And if you want to be a part of telling this story, this is an amazing time to join in to help be a visual observer. Go on that hike with your family, take a friend out, do something that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone, and maybe start a new project and a new app. Spend less time on Instagram and Facebook worrying about the world on fire, and maybe go out there and document some of what you're finding. You can make good observations by taking clear, close photos, focusing on wild organisms, so things that are out when you go on that hike. What is out there? Learn more about it with your families, your friends. You have to document the location that you're at, and you have to choose an idea of what you have, whether you just say it's a plant or whether you know what type of bee you have. You can still enter the data. But this leads to conservation outcomes. I really encourage folks to join this app. It helps to detect new species when they move to new areas. So depending on if you care about this as a conservation effort or as, preventing pests from invading the United States, this is an amazing data set to be contributing to. So just take those clear photos when you're out there. Take a lot of photos. It's my encouragement. But just getting started, you create an account just like any other app. I would do that on the computer. You can join certain projects if you're interested about certain things. It's great to do with children. This is an amazing way to engage with nature. And it helps with community science. You become a community scientist when you're entering data to this software. And education ultimately is going to help diminish fear of the unknown. Turning curiosity into confidence is really something I'm focusing on in my mentorship of younger, early career professionals. Teaching safety and respect for insects rather than fear is a real goal of my program. And it's really relevant. A few years ago, Colorado made insects wildlife. Now, Colorado Parks and Wildlife is having to build legislation and regulation and infrastructure around caring for the insects of Colorado. And from that, my partner, Tristan Kubik, is the entomologist with the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. I've known him 10 years, and he's been my partner for about a year. And we're both entomologists for Colorado. And I just want to talk about his insect survey. They're about halfway through. It's through the Colorado Natural Heritage Program. And you can engage with this survey if you're interested in helping. We are helping him as well. We're out helping to complete data in certain areas, but you as community scientists on iNaturalist could go out and help this 5-year-long project that's occurring right now. It started in 2024. It was funded by Colorado lottery money. And they were given about $7 million, his organization, to look at all wildlife in Colorado and come up with what do we have and how do we engage with it in a meaningful way so that it can be protected. But they're just data providers. They're not going in and managing land. They just tell you what's there. So the Colorado Natural Heritage Program and who they are, they're really a research and service department in Warner College of Natural Resources. So they are at CSU, and they're like home to the Colorado Bat Working Group. They now have this insect team, and they have wetland ecologists, and they're looking at this, really the rare occurrences in Colorado. And they ask a lot of different questions as an organization, but they're learning more about Colorado wildlife, and you can help their efforts by joining this Colorado statewide natural heritage survey as a community scientist on iNaturalist. You can help all of these Colorado organizations learn more about the wildlife and the plants that occur in Colorado. And out in Western Colorado, just last year, I was able to get to 15 counties with my crew, and we were able to get more insect data for Western Colorado. And we had an intern that was able to database all of our pollinators in our big collection I talked to you about at the beginning. And we now have, a lot of data feeding in to what will be accounted for in this statewide natural heritage survey. So it's a wonderful time. Surveys like this are few and far between, so it's rare that it's occurring for our state. And it's been wonderful as a mentor to help build lifelong skills to the individuals that I mentor. But I encourage all of you, if you have any interest in photography or the outdoors, consider contributing data to iNaturalist and help to complete the story for, this love letter to Colorado, where we're learning so much. Those are words of Tristan, about the wildlife here in this state through these efforts, and you can be a part of that. I have an iNaturalist. If you want to document where I am, what I'm seeing, what I'm doing, please follow along. I'm a botanical bug on there, and you can see the things that I'm posting. You can learn more about the insects of Colorado through my data. Um, but it's been really wonderful to photograph what's out there, and hopefully you've learned some today just about some of the really incredible insects that we have. But we're starting field season. It's another year. It's until 2029 that you can go out and document those birds, those lizards, those fungus, those plants, those insects, and we can tell this story for Colorado through the Natural Heritage Program's efforts. I really want to thank both my mentors that have inspired me and have helped get me to where I am today. That's Dr. Whitney Cranshaw, retired state extension entomologist, and retired Tri-River area extension entomologist Bob Hammond. You can never have too many allies in your corner, and I hope this talk resonates with you all. I appreciate the time with you today. But it takes courage for me to be up here and share, and try to change people's hearts. So I'm really grateful to you all for your time spent. Thank you so much. Here's my contact information. And if you have the ability and are willing, please give me your thoughts about how I presented today. I'll take them into consideration as an educator. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mel. I have a couple of questions, if you don't mind, for folks who want to hang on.
Yes.
Allison had to pop off so she can go to a presentation.
Yes.
She's continuing the recording. So you talked about the benefits of cockroaches in the wild. For those that can be problematic for us, what's their role in their natural habitat?
That's a great question. They're likely very much decomposers. I mean, when cockroaches are problems in like food safety environments, it's often because there's food we're storing or it's a restaurant setting. So they're natural scavengers. They get themselves into trouble by becoming, too close for comfort, and it becomes a public health issue, which is very much a real issue. I don't mean to minimize the issues cockroaches do. They can be traumatic for businesses, for having health, I can't remember when restaurants get shut down, what happens to them, but they fail some test. I mean, that can happen to people all the time, and it can happen because of certain pests that are infesting those environments. But often, just to quickly answer your question, they're scavengers, and they likely do decompose leaf litter on some extent, but they've become they've become almost domesticated by people. They rely on the food in our pantries and our restaurants for survival. So they've become a human pest for that reason. They actually often are thought that they wouldn't be able to live without the urban sector. Like they need humanity. They've almost been domesticated in that way. They've become a human problem from human environments. So many of our pest species, I think, wouldn't thrive very well out in the tropical Amazon, for example, like some of their cousins.
Thank you. And then, are there any bugs that mimic blister beetles? This person thinks they have quite a few on their property, but maybe they're misidentifying someone that's harmless.
Yeah, and you're welcome to reach out. I'm so much better with photos, but I can just try to spitball here. And yes, the answer is yes. There's many things that mimic blister beetles. Actually, I just saw a news article yesterday of some woman in the United States that had an allergic reaction to a tiger beetle. And I thought that for sure they had made a misidentification. But tiger beetles do very closely resemble blister beetles, and they're a common predator. And unfortunately, she had an allergic reaction when she encountered this one tiger beetle. I was so shocked. But they were able to involve entomologists, and they found out she had like a 1 in a million reaction to this species. But most of the time, blister beetles are thought to be problematic because they end up in alfalfa, and they're often then hayed up with alfalfa, and that alfalfa hay or grass mixture can be fed to livestock. And blister beetles contain cantharidin, which is a compound that's a chemical that burns flesh, unfortunately. So whether you sit on one or you pick one up unknowingly, it can cause severe burning and blistering. I unfortunately left my tent open once in Arizona and spent the night with some blister beetles, and I slipped on my skin, like my skin was falling off, unfortunately. So it was a pretty bad experience. It was a small area that was impacted, luckily for me, but it's good to have an awareness that blister beetles can be dangerous to touch. But feel free to send photos on. I'd be happy to confirm for you if that's what you have. But we have many that are just kind of innocent pollinators. I see many blister beetles that get wrongfully blamed. It's like if it's a blister beetle, it's bad. That should have been one of my myths I debunked today, because many of them are not harmful because they're not being hayed up and then eaten by animals. They're just out there pollinating plants. So, but don't touch them. You
All
can help.
right, and then one last question to wrap up. Somebody is asking about ticks and the fact that they just can't get over hating.
Yes. So I think I heard part of that. So something about ticks, and then I kind of, it
Oh,
got choppy for
they
me.
can't get over their hate of ticks.
Their hate of ticks. I understand. And ticks are ectoparasites. They are food for a lot of organisms out there, some of your well-known birds and lizards, and they have had quite the year, though. I've had a lot of tick calls, so I think it's relevant just to address with everyone in the room. Ticks overwintered fairly successfully this year alongside a lot of other arthropods. We didn't have cold temperatures and it got warm really early, on top of no moisture or freezing events. So many populations of pests and some of our good guys, but ticks being maybe one that's not everyone's favorite thing. They can vector disease to us. We have several ticks in Colorado that can, they're relevant medically. We do have a new program with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment where you can send them in the tick that you have found. So keep in mind, they're trying to learn more about ticks in Colorado, excuse me. And I think in order when we hate any group of animals, I think in order, and it's okay not to get over it. I think you're perfectly fine to not like ectoparasites. I'm not trying to convince you to love them, but there's a place for them in the environment. And the more we can learn about how they're relevant to the ecosystem or to the food web, that may help to ease some of our strong feelings.
Thank you so much. This was incredibly informative and love the enthusiasm as well and got a lot of great feedback.
Thank you all so much for your time today and hanging on, those that you did. Appreciate you. And reach out if you have questions. I'm looking forward to hearing from some of you.